Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters. My name is Colin Cox.
It's me, John. John's here. Colin.
Hello, my friend.
How are you tonight? Hello, my friend. Hello, my friend. We meet again. Colin sent me a video of Scott Stapp, and he's just doing a fucking Scott Stapp impression.
He is.
And it's so weird.
Yeah, I think at this point it's become something of a meme, right? So I think this is nice. This is an opportunity for you and I to be relevant with the kids. But I told you it looked like Scott Stapp Googled Scott Stapp and then did an impression of that guy from 20 years ago.
There are moments when I watch the Colin sent me a TikTok. That's how we're in it. We're in it to win it with the kids.
We do it.
He sent me a TikTok, and there's a moment when he starts to sing that you could see him registering in his brain, how do I sound? You could see him like going through the computer, computing. What do I sound like? Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Hello, my friend, meet again.
But he committed to it, which I think is
he committed to the bit.
Like,
he did.
Like,
there's a part where he has to like get a little bit falsetto, and he does not hit that. Time has not been super good to Scott Stapp of Creed.
Yeah, no, but he committed to it.
When you are with me, that's going to be in my head all day because of you.
Something. Yeah,
you've done this.
It's
a terrible song.
Well, like most of the awful things in our life, I would encourage you to blame Scott Stapp for this and not me. So
yeah, I blame Scott Stapp for if I stub my toe, that motherfucker.
Damn it,
Scott Stapp.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well,
that's great. I always he's a drunk, right? I heard he's a drunk boy. He likes it. He likes the liquor a little bit.
I mean, I don't know. Like everyone
likes
their
to fight
vices,
some.
But...
He reminds me of like. He reminds me of like Rip Torn. Do you know who Rip Torn is, the actor?
Yeah, from Men in Black. Yeah.
When Rip Torn is like young, I think that's what Scott Stapp's like. The best Rip Torn story is where he got so drunk he thought a bank was his house. And I'm always waiting to hear Scott Stapp. That's happened. Scott Stapp did that.
Scott Stapp thought a local credit union was his house.
Yeah, he did. Anyway.
How obnoxious do you think people are with him when they notice him? How many people do you think introduce themselves with "Hello, my friend, we meet again"?
It's got to be so many.
It's awful.
And they've got to be like, "I'm approaching you, Mr. Stapp, with arms wide open."
Yeah,
hoping for a hug. And you just want to punch all those people. I can't imagine. Yeah.
I mean, I can only assume that he has a level of financial stability that you and I will never understand. But I don't know if it's worth it. In all seriousness, I don't know.
No, it's like the same with Nickelback. You just want to like not be. I would change everything about my appearance,
sure,
and ride the tide of my Creed with arms wide open money, forever and ever and ever. Because who knows how much money that's made.
Yeah,
it's got to be just dump trucks.
It's a lot, and I mean, I can only assume there are royalties. What would be really funny and ironic is if both Scott Stapp and the lead singer to Nickelback did exactly what you said, but inadvertently, it's like a face-off situation where their recreation made them look like the other one.
Oh, that'd be fascinating. The guy from Nickelback, his name's Chad Kroeger, which is great. But if he shaves his mustache, he looks like Sam the Eagle from the Muppets, and you can't unsee it. So every time I see him, I see a Muppet, and I go, that ain't a real person.
They're Canadian.
Anyway,
right?
We're here to talk about Community.
Yeah, anyway. Speaking of Canadians, John, we are here to discuss, terrible segue, Community Season 5, Episode 8, App Development and Condiments. This episode originally aired on March the 6th, 2014, directed by Rob Schraub.
Have you been waiting all day? All day you've been waiting to do it. Rob Schraub. What a terrible name. I'm sorry, Rob Schraub, if you're a listener.
I don't actually think it's a terrible name. I think it's terrible when I say it. John, written by Jordan, Bloom and Parker Day. Did I get that right, I think?
Who cares? Yeah, sure. They're not going to listen. You could have said anything.
I could. Yeah. John, this is your IMDb plot summary. When a new app is beta tested on Greendale students, the campus soon descends into a dystopian society where status is determined by upstanding. That's not good. Upstanding?
Upstanding.
Upstanding?
What the is that a word?
It's not it's two words. So
upstanding.
The word
app
modifies
how
the word
your standing in your app is. I get it now. Okay.
Yeah.
That's very bad. That is tremendously
it's not
bad.
great.
Yes.
No, this is not, listen, clearly not Halo. This is whomever this Joker is, right? Probably Scott Stapp. That motherfucker. John, for a bit of context, I would say he did that. John, on ABC, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland at 2.3.
So this is the show Once Upon a Time, in Wonderland, I would assume.
Oh, I didn't see
Once Upon a Time's the show about, like, grown-up fairy tales or some shit. I don't know. I don't know anything about this show.
Is it from that guy who created Glee? Is that it?
It would seem like a Glee guy show. I know that Rumpelstiltskin's in it, which always makes me laugh, that they try to make this like a serious character.
Oh,
And I always just go, your name is Rumpelstiltskin. Everything's funny. No matter what you do, it's funny.
It is funny. Yeah.
Never seen this show, but they crushed, though, right? How'd they do?
Well, not so good. Not so good, John. On CBS, the big winner, There Is No Big Bang, because God made this bitch at 10.8.
Yeah, what a show that is.
Working title. Yeah.
People love that Sheldon. They love that fucking guy. I heard he hangs dong in this episode.
That's the bang part of the title. Yeah. Also, John said, I think we need to perform a mea culpa. The lead singer from Smash Mouth recently died.
Somebody wants to. They did. Why are we talking about that?
Don't they do the? Oh no, I'm thinking of a totally different.
That's
band.
the Bare Naked Lady.
Sorry,
the Bare Naked Lady's lead singer is in jail because he did blow off of a 15-year-old's belly. The lead singer from Smash Mouth, he died because he drank a lot. Poor guy.
Oh, that sucks. No, but
he also turned into a bit of a MAGA man there at the end.
Let's blame the alcohol abuse. But I know one of our listeners really likes Smash Mouth. So in all seriousness. Yeah. Condolences to anyone who likes Smash Mouth. I'm sure you're really sad about this. So
absolutely, that is sad. He was like 56. Sad times.
We said some disparaging things about Smash Mouth a couple of episodes ago. So,
well, you started it. I just joined in.
It wasn't me.
Mark that
Scott.
Down.
It was fucking
Robot.
Scott
If you could
Stapp.
mark that down in the books, please, I would appreciate it.
I blame Scott Stapp. John, on Fox, American Idol at 6.1. The winner, not Scott Stapp.
Oh, I thought it was going to be Creed. I thought it was going to be Creed. Smash Mouth won this night. Pour one out. That's who won.
Mea culpa. Mea culpa. Yeah. No, I think we've already suggested that Creed won one of these weeks. So
they win every week. They're amazing.
They do indeed. John, NBC, The Big Loser at 1.7. Community.
Yeah. What a show. A cavalcade of comedy. Ba 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 ba. Cavalcade of comedy here. This evening, we've got Tim and Eric showing up. Tim Heidecker, Eric Wareheim.
Oh, okay.
We've got Mitch Hurwitz showing up.
Dude.
We've got Brian Poston showing up. We've got Steve Agee from the now HBO hit Peacemaker. He's also in Suicide Squad. He plays King Shark.
Oh,
He plays the King Shark.
Oh, okay, cool.
He's voiced by Sylvester Stallone. How you doing? I'm a shark. I like to eat people. How you doing? But he also plays an actual character in the show. He did 2 roles.
Oh, cool.
Okay. So yeah, lot of comedians here.
Yeah.
This evening for a show that is, boy oh boy, what a show. I whenever I read your notes and I see that you don't write a lot of specifics, I think Colin might not have liked this one too much.
I think it's interesting. I think there are. I mean, how many times can Greendale descend into a dystopian hellscape? And this is not the first time this show has referenced like dystopian canonical literature. If you remember, the Brita subway narrative is basically 1984. I guess, John, I want to think about this episode, even though it's not as overt as the last episode, as another episode that maybe grapples with the loss of Troy, because that's definitely what the next episode does as well. So we almost have this trilogy of episodes, and I'll explain. I know it seems nebulous because there doesn't seem to be any overt connection, but I want to explain what I mean, okay? And to do that, I'll talk about Naomi Klein and the shock doctrine, but I'll get there, I promise.
Oh my
I think
God
this,
almighty.
I know, he's all, I know.
I got a mean liquor drunk kicking in, and I don't know if I can handle all this, but
Well,
maybe you'll sway me. I
maybe.
doubt it.
I don't know. But so, no, you didn't like this episode too much?
Oh, it's okay. It's bonkers. It goes all over the fucking place, and I think it reminded me of the Black Mirror episode Faceplant, or Nosedive,
Okay.
which is this exact thing, but like in real life.
Okay.
And so I thought, I wonder like the Nosedive writers saw this. It feels like they aped a lot from that because your social status is based on how many stars you have, things like that. I think there are things in the episode that are interesting, things that are really funny. Hickey's very funny in this episode. Abed trying his hardest to not be popular, but is popular because he's trying to not be popular because of his humility, which I think is very funny. Yeah. Chang is just the moment. There's a really funny moment in the episode when Chang realizes that if he limps, people like him more.
Yes.
And he gets his limp because he fell asleep. His ass fell asleep on the toilet. His leg fell asleep.
Correct.
And so he keeps his limp up. But later on in the episode, after he's hit five meow meow beans, I hate saying it. After he's hit 5 kitty cats, he actually has like arm crutches, so he's still keeping up the facade that he has a limp, even though he doesn't. That was very funny. That's very funny. Yeah. Mitch Hurwitz is the star of the show. Coogler steals this thing. Right? I think without him, the show is not nearly as enjoyable as I think it actually probably would be quite bad if it weren't for the Coogler character and the things he does. And I think the show realizes it because they give him the whole bumpers, and it's really fucking funny what they do with him.
It's pretty wild because it's wild because this character and this type has no place, aesthetically speaking, within this episode, right? I mean, he's basically what, Jim Belushi from Animal House.
He's Van Wilder.
He's Van Wilder from Van Wilder. I know he. The first time I saw this episode, and I thought, I know that person. I didn't realize it was Mitch Hurwitz at first.
Yeah,
and then it was. I mean, I think that's maybe why I have some affection for this episode, because this feels like a weird Arrested Development thing. Doesn't this feel like a thing Job would try to do?
Yeah, but Joe would fail miserably. Well, Joe would go back to college and really like try to be the cool kid.
Yeah.
But yeah, for those of you that don't know, Mitch Hurwitz is the creator of Arrested Development.
He is.
So
indeed,
if you're not aware of that like we always have these weird things that tie all of our shows together, and that's the pretty big one. Is that the creator of our first series is in this one. And he's fucking great, man. He's just top notch. He's so funny.
Yeah, he is. Well, I don't know how I feel about this episode. I think I like parts of it. I find some of it really, really funny, but I want to talk to you about it. So John, I think a good place to start is just with this app, Meow Meow Beans, BEENZ. Simple enough concept, and again, like, you would probably know this better than I would. It is not uncommon for social media sites to boost certain accounts. I mean, we know this, for example, with Twitter and what Elon Musk has done and how he makes certain accounts more visible for no other reason than they just seem to agree with his political positions, or they like him personally, and so that's enough incentive for him to increase their visibility. But Abed said something interesting at one point. He says, this is an app that takes all of the subjectivity of social interactions and makes it objective. But, I mean, it does insofar as it quantifies everything. But, I don't know, does that make things objective to you? Because, like, Shirley still just makes... I mean, she's making decisions that feel similar to the kinds of things Elon Musk does today with Twitter, right? Where if you are nice to him, then he boosts your visibility. But look at someone like Vicky, right, who gave Shirley 4 stars. And, I mean, look at what happened to Vicky. Again, this feels like... Shirley regrettably feels a bit like an Elon Musk figure, the way she controls this platform.
Yeah, it reminds me of early Facebook. Like Facebook, before Facebook became a thing, was just like a in-house app that Zuckerberg wrote to judge how hot, quote-unquote, college women were.
At Harvard,
in
right?
dorms. At Harvard.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what this is. But instead of like attractiveness, it's maybe like your quote unquote kindness, I guess. Even though Shirley runs that with an iron fist from the outset. But that's essentially all this is how how friendly do you think this person is, and if you see them as friendly, you give them more cats. I'm not saying meow meow beans the whole time.
That's fine.
I just hate it so much.
It's really annoying to say, but I think that's the point, right?
It is for sure. But that's the whole idea, and I think, it's still insanely subjective. Any side or any sort of metric where you rank anything is beyond subjective. There is no objectivity in that whatsoever, and I think Abed misses that point completely.
But it's understandable why he does, right? Because to some degree he's right. Like, how do you quantify social interactions? That's almost impossible to do. So at the very least, this app tries to do something that's impossible, but I think perhaps for Abed, it's just, well, someone has finally tried to do this, right? And even if he fails to see the flaws in the calculations, at least there's something, right? But that's also part of what I find really bizarre about this episode, John, is it feels like an episode from the start that wants to interrogate the way social media platforms do the very things that, again, we see Elon Musk do with Twitter, but there's something about like that theme. The episode loses it seems, which I think that's part of what I found so frustrating about it. I mean, there is this bit at the end when Jeff says, if we all just choose to delete the app, it no longer has power. But it really does feel like that theme, just the episode loses that theme entirely, just because that feels like the critique the episode wants to make. But I'm just not sure it actually makes it in any meaningful way.
Oh, sure. I don't know. I think that's a very good way to put it. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think you're right, though. I think I don't. At the end of the episode, I don't necessarily know what I'm supposed to feel about this app. I feel about the students of Greendale how I always feel about every single one of these fucking episodes, is that they are all pretty much sheep and will go along with whoever stands up and has a good idea, which we see they exemplify that in this episode where Britta stands up and puts mustard on her face and they immediately listen to her. Because I still don't fully grasp what that is supposed to mean, but that's just something that happens. And I think this episode, again, just follows in that line, in that suit of the Greendale students don't have any brains of their own. And that's how I have felt after every single one of these. This one in particular, I think they were trying to do something maybe with Britta at the end that ultimately just fails miserably.
Yeah, again, it's just lost, right?
It's just completely lost because all Jeff says is, we don't need this, just delete it. And then you're back to normal after 8 days of this nonsense.
Which I suppose maybe that is the argument the episode wants to make, is if we all just choose to ignore these platforms, then they, I suppose, lose power. But we also know that's not true, right? Because, I mean, like, sure, in a world where everyone stops using Twitter, Twitter loses whatever tenuous power it has. But that's just not only will that not happen, this is one of those times, John, where I become incredibly frustrated with the show, because it seems like the point it wants to make is, you as the individual have the power to change this, but we don't. We need stronger, greater, more systemic forms of intervention to actually change. Like, if we want to imagine, for example, that Meow Meow Beans is a metaphor for Facebook or what Twitter currently is, all of us as individuals, like you and I, you have elected to stop using Twitter. I'm sorry, and I think you know this, that changes nothing about how Twitter works. Just because you as a single individual decided to stop. What needs to happen is large collective, and in this case, government intervention to curb the way these social media platforms work. They basically need to be policed like other forms of communication, but they're just not, right? They fall, at least as I understand it, outside the purview of those regulations. I just wish Community would make that point, but instead it always reverts back. Like, again, that's basically Jeff's point, is just embrace your power as an individual and as a consumer. Choose not to consume this product, and then it loses its power. I reject that premise.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and also because like they could have changed it with a couple. If they had the sentence like, if they hadn't had that little piece of dialogue in where Jeff says the beta test is over and now it's on the App Store, because at that point, essentially, when you delete it, nothing matters.
Right.
Because the thing is out in the public and people can use it. But if you deleting the app caused them to fail, now you're saying something, jointly about what you as a group could do collectively, because they mentioned that we're the beta testing group for this or whatever. So you have the ability to stop this, but they don't do that. Instead, they do nothing at the end. That means nothing.
Right. Yeah. And that's really good, John. Again, it's just this, well, I as an individual, I mean, it feels very libertarian in this way, right? At least libertarian in the way that like maybe an American
Love those
would understand.
Guys. Love those fucking guys.
Again, and maybe exclusively the way an American would understand what that term means, where, hey, all I can do is what I can do as an individual. I will choose not to use this platform. I have made an ethical decision. Done and done, right? But that's not meaningful change. But the episode, and I guess this is my point, the episode wants you to think that's meaningful change, but it's really not. It's just not, like how, I'm sorry, in the last 20 years, I can think of maybe one example of like a boycott really working.
What's the one that worked?
This might sound strange, but the Bud Light thing.
Oh, I guess that kind of worked. A little bit, yeah. They lost a bunch of money. So.
Yeah, but that worked for a very particular reason because of the particulars of that commodity, right? So I think that's, but like, yeah, it's just, I think the point is, I'm deeply skeptical, unfortunately, of what these kinds of like boycotts and protests can do, because that's also what it sounds like Jeff advocates, is we just need to boycott this app and then everything will be fine. And I just, I think I reject that, so...
Well, I think the best line of dialogue in the episode comes from the dean at the end over the PA system, where he says, we should all probably forget about the past 8 days because I'm sure we're all deeply embarrassed about what happened.
Yeah.
And I think if people could just have that mentality regarding much larger events, that would be something great. If social media allows you to realize that about yourself, but it doesn't. It does the exact opposite. You just end up in an echo chamber where everybody's just as fucking, full of vitriol as you are. And what's the point?
Yeah,
it's terrible.
And again, that's really interesting. I mean, again, Abed seems to see, because I mean, I think ostensibly what you mean is, at least what I heard was, it's hard to find like subtlety and nuance when you communicate through social media platforms. But that seems to be a thing that Abed really likes about Meow Meow Beans, is that it simplifies everything. But in doing so, look at what it does, right? It just creates these different factions along these lines and divisions that are incredibly nebulous and like, again, like, what does it mean to be a 5? Why, what sorts of characteristics and predilections does someone like Shirley have that makes her a 5? And how is that similar to what we see with Chang or Coogler? Because they all seem like wildly different kinds of characters. So again, all of this is just wildly unclear, even though Abed's point seems to be this clarifies everything. And I just, I wish it did, but I just don't know if that's the point. And I think this is like super interesting as well, right? Like all of this rhetoric about Twitter, for example, being a place where people can have meaningful, nuanced conversations. I mean, obviously that's nonsense because the goal is just to make you as angry as possible, right? I mean, that's
Right.
baked into the form of the app itself. And I think Meow Meow Beans takes that idea and, of course, exaggerates it to the point that we see the satirical point, which is none of these social media platforms can actually do that. The goal is to sustain engagement by annoying you and
Yeah.
scandalizing you and creating sensationalized content and
Yeah.
yeah. So
And radicalizing you against people that are different than you
yeah.
because of their social status. They get that. Like the writers of the show get that. That's what social media does. I can remember, I think early on seeing an ad for Twitter when it was like in its infancy about like, I think maybe the tagline was join the conversation. And I can remember when I got into Twitter, I thought, this is the most disgusting place that I have ever. I just feel so unclean anytime
Sure.
I'm looking at Twitter. And until you like really, really go through and curate that, it just is an echo chamber of this nastiness. And now, when I was on right before I got off, right after old Muskie Boy took over, it got so much worse in every way because he just took away the essential things to make you not see this dog shit that you have to see all the time. And yeah, I think that is what the episode excels at, is showing how quickly even this like really dumb idea of using cats to rank people can turn you into a monster.
Yeah.
Very, very quickly. The best moment is when the very, very beginning, when the dean gets his sample Meow Meow Beans and he immediately gets sad. Mm-hmm. And you think, well, that's what social media is. You've defined it. You post something that you think is going to get a bunch of likes, it gets 3, and now you judge yourself by that.
Yeah.
Everybody does that. That's just how it goes.
Or you think it's something really clever and you receive one negative response, and that one
That's
negative
it.
response is, and I think you see this with Vicky as well, right? Where, I mean, 4 out of 5, that's at least by...
That's still pretty good.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, it's John, it's as good as one can get using a 5-point metric, right? Because you cannot award half points. So this is, as you said, this is as close to perfect as this app allows. But look at what happened to Vicky because of it, and look at her reaction to it, right? I mean, she's devastated when she falls to a 1. So I think that's a really nice point, like taking a moment and really acknowledging the way people react to negative reactions, right? Not just positive reactions, but negative reactions as well. And I think this is what's also interesting, how quickly everything can shift for you. I mean, think about, for example, one of those 2 bouncers who just stumbles over his words for a moment, and he immediately becomes this scapegoated figure, right? Immediately. All it takes, and like, listen, I want to be clear, I'm not making some, I say one racist thing on Twitter and then I get canceled, isn't that terrible? But it's just, even this idea of like a perceived mistake or indiscretion. And what's the mistake or indiscretion? He just stumbles over his words, right? It's not even a thing he said, which is part of the irony here, right? It's a thing he didn't say. And that becomes this vehicle for all of this antagonism and vitriol from people around him. So, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe this episode is a little smarter about social media engagement than you and I gave it credit initially. Maybe.
Yeah, and I think, the show has to go as silly as it does because the opposite is it just goes tremendously dark. And I think those are the only 2 sides of that, those are the only 2, like on the scales, you have to weigh those 2 against each other because the Black Mirror episode Nosedive, you should watch that if you haven't. That's what like the really dark version of this is how much can I ruin someone's life because they're quote unquote unlikable, because one day I saw them trip and fall in the street, so now I'm going to give them a terrible score. And that's bullshit. You don't want to see that, so you have to go the opposite route where like every single sect is doing different things. Like the 3s become these like neutral I don't even know what the threes are. The twos are like the neutral servants who serve the fours and above.
Yeah.
The fours are dressed like in futuristic togas.
We're
But
getting
they're colored.
some like Logan's Run
Oh,
references
that's
happening
it.
here.
Yeah, that's what they're going for. Sure. And then the fives are in all white, and it reminded me of when I watched Big Love, and I found out that the final boss in the Mormon Church. It's just a room where everybody's in white, and I thought, oh, okay, that's what they're doing now.
Yeah.
I get it. They're a cult. You've become a cult now.
Yeah, and like that's I wanted to say this as well because I think it's interesting how, again, like from a socioeconomic perspective, what is the difference between Chang and Britta, right? Why? And I think that's what's really interesting about this as well. Again, like this challenge to Abed's assertion that this app quantifies it accurately quantifies social interactions and maybe even social status. Well, again, we're seeing a lot of like trivial determinations here. I don't know why, like on what grounds, aside from, as you said, the fact that he's basically doing like disability porn at this point, right? Like that's what Chang's doing.
Yeah.
And that's enough, right? Even though from a socioeconomic perspective, I don't see how he could be a 5, right? But then again, this is Greendale. Like, does anyone have, and I think this is also what's really interesting, does anyone have any claim to 5 status? I think everyone, and this is like this thing with Hillary Clinton, right? Where we should all think of ourselves as deplorables. And I think like Greendale, when it's at its best, beautifully articulates that idea. But this is one of those episodes where we see it at its worst, where it wants to assume that there are people who operate as figures of exception and everyone else is ostensibly a deplorable. And that's Greendale, again, not at its best, I would argue. So,
yeah, I think an episode I would love to see is the person from a person's point of view who is forced to make all the clothing for these people. There has got to be one, like a seamstress for the theater department. Like she's like a teacher there, a professor, or he is. And they have to make all these costumes. That's what I want to see. Just an episode about what are we doing? Why do I have to consistently do this bullshit? Because I don't know where this comes from. Where do you get these props? Where do you get all these costumes? Where do you get this food? At one point, they're like playing futuristic instruments in the study room.
Sure. Yeah.
And I thought this is straight out of like Bill and Ted, because that's what I imagine in the future. That's what all the futuristic people look like. Yeah, I think it does a good job at being silly with this subject matter, because again, maybe at this point, this is 2014. Mm-hmm. Social media is still is pretty big here. I don't know if people have started like committing suicide because they're being bullied by it, but I think you can't put that in. You can't put that in the episode. So instead, we'll just put in that Garrett's loud, so he's a 3.
Right.
Or Chang. Everybody knows Chang is faking a limp, but we can't say no to him because he's been doing it for so long.
I mean,
Hickey's had a birthday every day, so now Hickey's a 5.
Yeah, so this would have been, I don't know when Andrew and I did this episode on the Cluttered Desk, John, but we did an episode about this particular piece that like David Brooks wrote about cancel culture. David Brooks is an idiot, but it gave us an opportunity.
Yeah,
it afforded
fuck you,
us,
David Brooks.
He's so stupid. He's the Scott Stapp of like dumb white conservative writers.
Hell yeah.
But it afforded us an opportunity to learn a bit about the history of both cancel and I think in its previous iteration, people called it call out culture. And
okay,
John,
sure.
like part of what we learned was this was like that kind of harassment that you're describing, and then these rather tragic responses to it. This was definitely a thing happening in 2012, 2013, 2014, probably back to like, my God, since the internet existed, right? People have been harassing others online once they discovered who they are. So I think, yes, that was certainly a thing happening. And so I think, again, this episode, when you just think about how it triangulates the way people can so quickly turn on one another. And again, like the Vicky situation is such a perfect example of this, how she becomes this immediate scapegoated figure, and then this extreme emotional reaction she has in response to it. And even this like metaphor of the one, right? That you are someone who exists in this like non-civilized space, right? You become basically a non-person at this point. And thinking about how that is a beautiful articulation, at least from the literature I've read, it's a beautiful articulation of how it feels to be someone who has received harassment online, that you feel like you have no recourse to any like meaningful change. You are just someone who exists in this like non-civilized space in the world, and that is your existence, right? No one sees you, no one acknowledges you. You basically become a non-person. And so I think like in that way, the way this episode treats ones, I think is, as you said, maybe a beautiful articulation, unfortunately, of what it's like to receive harassment on these social media sites. You just feel like you become a non-person at this point.
Sure. Yeah, it reminds you. Have you read the book by John Ronson, So You've Been Publicly Shamed?
No, I don't think I have. That sounds interesting.
About like in internet culture before that, but mostly figures in the internet that go viral for doing something that maybe wasn't in their best, they weren't in their, proper mindset at the time. And now that's how they're seen forever, is this one terrible thing I've done.
Okay, got it.
And he interviews Monica Lewinsky in the book. And,
that's interesting.
And talks about like shaming regarding her, because that's all we think of her about, and not these like tremendously wonderful other things this woman's done.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is just, how do I shame you with a kitty cat app? Which, if you're doing that, that's very embarrassing. If you're using Twitter to shame someone, you should be a very embarrassed person. Unless they're a piece of shit, then I get it. I totally get it.
But even then, like this idea that like, well, but if they're a piece of shit. But how do you objectively make that determination, right?
No, you're not wrong.
Yeah,
you're not, unless you're Donald Trump, I guess, or Mitch McConnell. One of those two.
Sure, I suppose. But again, I think that's, some people would argue, as they do and have, that they're not, in fact,
not wrong. You're not wrong.
Awful people, but they're actually patriotic heroes, right? So again, we're talking about things that are deeply subjective and not, as Abed would want them, objectively quantifiable. So.
Yeah, and that's just, this show is just that on a much smaller scale.
Much smaller scale.
Than what we see every fucking day of our existence. Every single day, something like this happens.
Yeah.
It gets old, man. I think maybe that's why the episode didn't resonate with me that much, is because every day I see this in real life, and it has horrendously bad consequences for people. And here I just thought they're making a mockery of it, when in reality I think they're making a bit of a great critique about how dumb we all should feel for doing this, and how quick, groupthink occurs. It doesn't take long, really.
No, it doesn't. And as an episode that was produced in 2014, it's interesting how it probably accurately read, because I mean, this is something I put this in our show notes, right? Any text that either situates itself in the past, which is to say it's a period piece, or maybe even any text that situates itself in the future, which is to say it's offering some speculative, futuristic, maybe apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic impression of the world. I would argue those kinds of texts are their best when they're not necessarily commenting on the past or imagining the future, but really commenting on the present, right? And I think this is a lovely episode that was both commenting on the reality of 2014, because Trump started campaigning for president in what, a little over a year after this episode originally aired. I mean, 2016 is not that far away from this episode. And the world that we know, the one that you just described, it's the genesis of that world is not so far away from this episode. So I think like this is an episode that wants to think of itself as this futuristic, speculative episode, but I think it beautifully commented on 2014. And as you said, like feels exhausting watching in 2023 because of just how right it got everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
So tell me this wild, I don't know, theory that you want to go into about Troy.
Wild theory. Okay, so we talked about the last episode as an episode where characters like Jeff and Abed experienced a kind of regression, and the episode clarified that, especially for Abed, but I think you and I effectively discussed how it's relevant for Jeff as well. This gap or this hole that Troy produced by leaving seemed to propel these characters into this regression, right? And so I guess what I was thinking was, who's the character in this episode who seems the most regressed? Who's the character in this episode who seems frightened, upset, maybe even paranoid? I think it's Shirley, right? We see this from the very beginning. And we're seeing, John, this iteration of Shirley that feels like the kind of character we saw from season 1. This deeply manipulative character, this paranoid character, this insecure character, in particular about her place in this group. And so what I was thinking was, because think about the inciting incident for this episode. It's Shirley's anxiety about the group excluding her, right? And so I guess I was thinking, with Troy leaving, it's created this shock or this monumental instability in the group. Because, yeah, you could argue Pierce, he was technically the first character to leave, but he left a long time ago, right? Like that didn't produce the same kind of shock that Troy did. And as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about this Naomi Klein book, The Shock Doctrine. Are you familiar with this book?
I have no clue what this is. No.
Okay, so it's this book she wrote in 2007 about how, in particular, during times of deep economic crisis and instability, both capital and governments, often in coordination with one another, do things that they otherwise would have no freedom to do if not for that shock. And so she writes about, for example, what the United States government did after the 9/11 attack, right? And how everything the Bush administration did, because we were all so almost pathologically focused on this fear of the Middle Eastern terrorist, right? And so that created this kind of permission structure. So in the wake of this shock, our government didn't necessarily have permission, but they used that as an opportunity, as an impetus to do this awful thing. So I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about, well, what do we see from Shirley in this episode? Well, it's an episode where she's desperately attempting to harness and collect all of this power and influence in the wake of the shock of Troy leaving. And I suppose I don't have sympathy for capitalists or any government that would attempt to do that in the wake of either a geopolitical or economic moment of instability. But I think it's a useful framework to understand why Shirley does what she does, because she sees this group as now incredibly unstable. Now they've just decided not to invite her to dinner. Well, why? Well, Troy's gone, perhaps in the wake of this loss. The group will reconfigure itself. Now Chang's in the group. I wonder if for Shirley, a character who has always felt anxious about her place in this group, if she perhaps imagines this is an opportunity for them to slowly start excluding me. And I'll use this shock, I'll use this moment as an opportunity to harness power and influence. And I think I was thinking about that as a way of understanding her motivations in this episode. And maybe, I don't know if that allows us to then have sympathy for her because, again, like, I don't have sympathy for the Bush administration and what they did after 9/11, but Shirley's an individual and not the most powerful government entity in the world. So that's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Okay. I don't think I agree with you.
Please.
But I do think that is a fascinating,
Okay.
a fascinating take on this whole thing. No, I think the group. I read it like this. Here's how I read it, and maybe because I've been in a situation like this, I took it this way. Once you are with a certain group of people for so long, you learn their routine. You just know
Okay.
it. You know what, like my friends know on Thursdays, I podcast with you. So Thursdays are out. If I want to hang out with somebody, if I want to do something, no, we do this Thursday. This is it. I shut off everything except this. And I think that is all Jeff was doing. I think by not inviting Shirley, he was just in his brain thinking, this is nicer than me inviting her and then the disappointment that she can't come. I think that's what's Jeff thinking in his brain. And Shirley, because and I've been dealing with this lately too. No one wants to feel any type of rejection.
Sure.
No one wants to feel rejected, and I think the thing Shirley is doing is just a very petty revenge, as a knee-jerk reaction for the feeling of rejection that was placed on her by Jeff, even though it was not done with any sort of ill regard. I think it was just something that was done out of, in Jeff's brain, courtesy, in Shirley's brain, maybe you're trying to not include me. You're trying to get rid of me. And so I guess what you're saying could somehow fit in there. Maybe if we combine the two, I'd get on board, I think.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, I think what's interesting, John, is I think you're right about potentially both Jeff's motivations and how Shirley feels. But I think, would you say both of those things, they're not mutually exclusive, right? Like, they can exist at the same time. Because I mean,
for sure.
If and we know this about Shirley, right? I mean, even think about the things she said to Troy when Troy left. She said, thanks for hanging out with the uncool mom for 4 years, right? Like, Shirley's always saw herself as a person who is in this group but doesn't fit in this group. And I guess I was always thinking, like, what that means is that she doesn't feel safe with these people. She feels precarious most of the time. And so any little thing, John, any little thing where she's not invited, where she's not included, even if, and I agree with you, right? Like, they all realize Tuesday works. And then Shirley is always busy on Tuesday, so we just won't say anything to her because why upset her? But of course she would read it that way. And I guess part of what I find maybe surprising, John, is Jeff is really good at, like, anticipating how people will react. How did he not anticipate that Shirley would react this way if she ever learned about it?
For sure, yeah. And I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I think the whole thing, again, it stems from an idea of miscommunication.
Sure.
That just jumps to the furthest insane consequence for not just talking to someone, which is most media, I feel like, would be solved in a few minutes if people just talk to each other.
Well,
but alas,
wouldn't you say that if most people just talk to one another, they could probably resolve a lot of these sorts of conflicts? But I guess, like, can we pause for a second? Could we imagine that Jeff's motivations to not invite Shirley are not as benign as you made them seem?
Do you think?
I guess here's what I'm thinking, and this is another reason why I mentioned Melanie Klein's The Shock Doctrine, because we have spent a fair amount of time discussing Troy as a character who, at least from an archetypal perspective, is probably a better leader and hero than Jeff is, right?
I'll agree with that, yeah.
That character's gone, man. There's a vacuum now, right? And I guess I was wondering, because notice how Jeff responds. He's a little belligerent when they even mention it. I wonder if you could, because they had this conversation about power and influence at the end of the episode. If by not inviting Shirley, it maybe had absolutely nothing to do with Shirley, it was just a way for him to exercise power. And it was a way for him to fill that void left by Troy. And I think in that way, like, this is basically what Klein argues in the shock doctrine. In the shock doctrine is these moments of crisis are opportunities for capital and government, often in coordination with one another, to assume authority that they would otherwise not have an opportunity to assume if not for this moment of mass instability. And that's maybe part of what I'm imagining here is this is Jeff, like, I don't know, like gobbling power a little bit, gobbling influence a little bit.
Using the word gobbling power is very funny to me when I have a buzz. I've always loved how deeply into things you read. I just don't see that. But
okay,
I know as you said that, there was a listener who went, "Oh my God, Colin is absolutely right." And then right after that, a listener went, "Colin doesn't know what he's talking about."
Hey, listen, that's exactly how I would want them to respond. Yeah, which is both. That makes sense, and I think he's crazy. So no, I don't mind that at all.
No, I love when you school me, man. I love when you take me to class. It's one of my favorite things.
Hey, we need to talk about Britta. Thank you. That's kind of you to say. We need to talk about Britta and the mustard, because Britta's also...
What's the deal? What's the deal with the mustard? I genuinely don't know what the fucking deal is.
I mean, I think it's a lot like the app itself, where the app is this way of distracting from this other thing that's actually occurring. Because that's really the point that everyone makes is that when you have the mustard on your face, I focus on the mustard and not on your behavior, which means I'm more receptive to your message. I think it's just in the same way that we often need maybe forms of distraction to, like, I don't know, make ideas and arguments more palatable. I think that's maybe what we're seeing here to some degree. So
everybody has the Riddler thing on their head. Remember that from Batman Forever?
Yeah.
And the mustard on her face is Batman.
The what? Oh, so the mustard is Batman.
That's what breaks the spell. That's how they're able to see the truth. No, I think maybe Britta is known for her insanity, and I think that, like you said, the mustard takes away from the fact that we can actually listen to the words that you're saying instead of just completely discarding you as soon as you start talking.
Yeah. It's. I think in some of it as well is Britta seems so self-serious most of the time, but how can you ever begrudge someone who has a giant dollop of mustard on their face? You know who it reminds me of, funnily enough? The way people talk about Boris Johnson in the UK, and how, like, he would seem like a bumbling idiot as a way of distracting people from the awful things he wants to do. Like, this is like the lesson Trump really should have learned, which is, if I want to do awful, sinister things, I just need to, like, actively seem like an idiot instead of trying to seem serious but being an idiot.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's terrifying to think that they're falling for this schlub who is just knows he's just being a bumbling moron.
Listen, there are these stories about Boris Johnson. Like, he has this, like, weird haircut that he basically looks like
insane.
Doc Brown. And
it's crazy.
And like people would say, like, before he would do like TV spots, he would like do this to his hair to make himself look like more insane. Like he basically put mustard on his face. That's what he was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd look at that when in reality he's saying
exactly.
I'm gonna burn down a city. They'd be like, oh, this guy's hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, very good, John. Yeah. I mean, it works differently with Britta, but I think the point is, the hair distracts me from the awful thing he says. With Britta, it's the mustard distracts me from the awful way she seems. Therefore, I'm more receptive to the message. Yeah,
sure.
totally.
Sure. Yeah. All right. Jesus Christ.
Oh, I think do we have anything else? We talked about Mitch Hurwitz. He's spectacular in this episode.
It's fantastic.
God, he's so funny.
He's so good.
Yeah. Coogler. It's just, he doesn't enter the episode until like minute 10 or something crazy like that.
Oh, I know. He's so good. Coogler's a great name also. I don't know how they figured that out, but it's great. Coogler. It's just, is it the name you'd give, one name you'd give like a douchebag way in college. Here comes the Coogler. Hey, what's up, dude?
Did you see the reference on the marketing material at the end, that it's adapted from a French novel? Did you see this?
I did not. I saw you wrote it in your notes, but I did not see it.
Yeah,
No.
so I won't pronounce the French, but John, it translates to the despair of the workers. And I really love this little joke where it's like an American studio adapted what is probably this like unbearably depressing French novel into like a campus raunch comedy, right? Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I think the episode, the more we talk about it, the more I'm starting to lean into it. They do go really, they lean very hard into the realization of everything. They go as deep as they can with this dystopian Logan's Run aesthetic. There's a Zardoz reference.
I thought you would love that. Yeah.
It's I've never seen that film. I don't think I could watch it and like have a serious face. I just don't think I could do it. Sean Connery with like his member out the whole time. I mean, how do you take it seriously? There's no way.
The crazy thing about this, John, is like I've seen the marketing materials for this. Do you know when this movie was produced?
I feel like it was in the 70s, but
it was
I don't.
Like 73,
I don't know.
John. Like he's not that far removed from doing Bond.
Yeah, but like after Bond, man, he hit a fucking slump, huh? There wasn't a lot of money rolling in for the Sean Connery train.
Hey, we should watch Zardoz together at some point. Let's see if we can make it through.
I really don't think I could. The whole time I would be just looking at what's happening with like the red sort of diaper thong situation that's going on. It's so weird.
John, I can't. Yeah, I don't. I am not confident that I could finish it either. I'm just curious. Let's see. It was 73. I can't imagine it's that long of a movie. Okay.
I don't know.
Hold on.
They had some shit come out then. Yeah.
Hold on. Zardoz. Hold on. Oh, come on.
Uh-oh.
Almost there.
Uh-oh. He's almost got it.
No, is there no information about how long this movie is? I find
no one knows how long Zardoz is.
Now I have it. John, how long do you think this movie is?
It's got to be over 120 minutes. I'm gonna guess like 152.
It's 1 hour and 45 minutes.
Okay, I could probably.
You could probably.
There's a chance I could possibly.
I think you could do that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's less than 2 hours, so.
I don't want to watch it anyway, Colin. That's all I got to say about this episode.
Me too.
Of Community.
Oh, segments.
App something and
something.
Condiments.
Yeah, segments. Yeah, John.
Segments. Let's go.
I need you to check the Dean's List and identify your best performance for this episode.
I will check the Dean's List.
Is that what I said?
Which is the first time Colin has ever said that.
John, I need
to
know
in the 5 seasons of this show.
Who makes
I will check the Dean's List.
Who makes
and
the
see
Dean's
who's
list.
on it.
Yeah, check it and see who's on it.
It's Mitch Hurwitz.
It's Coogler. Yeah.
Yeah. It's 100% Mitch Hurwitz. Check the syllabus, Colin. This is where we talk about sort of metatextual, intertextual play. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess the Coogler thing. The Van Wilder Animal House National Lampoon's movie with Coogler in it. That's got to be mine.
I'm trying to think. The reference to Baby Boomer Trivial Pursuit, which is just Trivial Pursuit, right?
Oh, you're right. Yeah. The worst kind of Trivial Pursuit.
Yeah. So
the worst kind.
Yeah. I think that's
they're like, they ask you questions like who directed the 1949 movie My Dinner with Fancy. And
Yeah.
you go, was that a movie?
Well,
Who knows?
It often, like, when I think about Trivial Pursuit, especially the history section, it reminds me of that joke John Mulaney made, which is, why does it seem like all of our dads are studying for this World War II exam that they'll need to take one day? But John, do you have any best lines?
I don't. My favorite line in the episode was number one. My favorite performance is when Hickey almost literally has a stroke at the beginning of the episode, trying to handle the Meow Meow Bean steak. When they come out with it, he just sits back and goes, "I fought for this country." And then Brian Poston, who's very funny, gets an alarm on his phone that tells him he has to go poop. It's time for me to go take a number 2. No, I think my favorite delivery in the episode is when Tim Heidecker, who is a saint from heaven, I love this man so much.
Funny.
When he's like, "See you later, new beans," that just made me laugh so much, just because it's Tim Heidecker. And then when he thinks back on his relationship with this man named Matthew, the delivery's so good. So good. But that's all I have. What about you, man?
Okay, Shirley's line, "You don't like my face?" That's a really funny line. Hickey, "Here you go. Nobody is going to downvote a guy on his birthday." He's trying on hats in his office early in the episode. This is something Britta says. "Maybe it deludes or distracts from your stupid butt." She says that to Annie. This is something Jeff says. It's awful, but it's just, again, one of these moments where like subtext becomes text. "Haul it, ball it, never call it. Girls are objects." And then he high fives all those guys. So
girls are objects.
Yeah. Small talk, guys. I make small talk now. That's something Abed says. Dude, Kugler line. "Hey, I know what you guys think of me. Hey, it's Kugler. He's cool. He likes to get laid. He's not that old." Jeff's, "I admire your optimism, Garrett." This is when Garrett asked to take a photo with him, and he says, "I want to show this to my children one day. I admire your optimism, Garrett." "Look at the mustard on my face and listen to my words." That's something Britta says. Dude, this is an exchange in the bumpers between Kugler and the Dean. "Do you even have a career plan? Does getting laid count?" "No!" Oh, John, that is our conversation for Season 5, Episode 8, App Development and Condiments. John.
Yes.
We have a Patreon page.
We do have a Patreon page. For $3 a month, you get all the exclusive, delicious content. I have no idea what we're talking about this month, but I'm sure it will be something good. Above that, for $7 a month, you become producer of the show. Every episode, we talk about how much we appreciate you. You get a sticker of the current theme of the show. Right now, it's a community sticker designed by Colin Cox, the co-host extraordinaire over here. He's doing 2 thumbs at himself. Above that, you become producer of the show. You get a T-shirt, a sticker, and excuse me. Above that, you become a mega producer. You get a sticker, a shirt, and we talk about how much we love you. We give you a bunch of kisses, and above that, you get some of my shoes. I don't know, whatever you want, Colin.
Hey, if you become a mega producer, we will give you 5 Meow Meow Beans.
Oh, right out the gate.
Just you get the
right
5.
Out the gate.
You get the 5 to start. Yeah. No, thank you to our following producers, or the following producers of this wonderful podcast. Thank you to Katana, Crindy, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Lars, Rob, Robin, Jeff, and Andrew. And John's right. It's the first link in the show notes. The second link is to our Threadless page if you would like to buy Hop-Ons podcast merchandise. And John, if someone were so inclined as to rate and review this podcast, what would you say and what would I say?
Well, I don't know what you would say, but I would say, boy, howdy, that helps a lot. If you rate and review the show, it helps us get noticed when people type community into their search engine on podcasts. We show up as the number 1 urban development podcast in the nation. That's what we're going for. But no, it does help us get noticed. And we will read your review here on the air. You can have me read with these dulcet pipes, born and bred here in the Appalachian Highlands of Virginia. Colin.
And don't call it Appalachia. For all I hear this so
For
much.
For fuck's sake, please don't do that.
Listen, I don't mind.
We live here.
I don't mind if people want to do research about this region. There's a lot of interesting things to talk about. John, anytime I hear someone say Appalachia, I think you have no idea. You know nothing about this region.
Which is
probably not
true. It makes
true,
me very
but that's
upset.
how it makes me feel. So
it makes me mad. Like if it's somebody I like and they say it, I get so upset.
It's so no, guys. Appalachia,
assholes.
not Appalachia. Don't do that.
Appalachia.
Don't do that.
That's the Appalachia Mountains. Everybody there is from Appalachia. Why am I doing this accent? Where'd that come from?
It's the gin, I think. Yeah, that's your gin. This is gin.
It was
John.
bourbon. I had Blanton's tonight, so I had some of that good shit.
Yeah,
you know,
that's good stuff, buddy. Yeah.
Anyway, that's it. That's all we got. That's all the juice I can afford to give you. That's all the juice I can wheeze. Remember, Pauly Shore used to say "wheeze the juice." That was so fucking weird.
I don't remember that, but I believe you.
Really? You're not a Pauly Shore fan?
Did he do jury duty?
I don't want to talk to you anymore. Everybody, Colin is lying to himself. Love y'all for the Hop-Ons podcast. My name.
I don't remember that. I'm
John
sorry.
Phelps.
No, but he did. Yeah, he was in jury.
Did he do jury duty?
I'm just
yes, Colin.
I don't. I sometimes I confuse him with Rob Schneider. That's why I was asking.
You should be beyond ashamed.
Okay, John.
You confuse
bye.
God's gift to acting, Pauly Shore, with Rob Schneider.